Welcome to the Moon in Gemini podcast. I am your witch in residence, April Edwards. This is our astrology of the week for June 22nd to the 28th. This week begins in emotional alignment. It moves through commitment, uncertainty, and the tension between what is real and what we want to believe. And then at the end of the week, Mars changes signs. Mars leaves the slow, deliberate terrain of Taurus and enters Gemini, accelerating thought, speech, movement, conflict, and desire. What has been building steadily begins to move quickly. What has been held in the body enters language. What has remained unspoken may suddenly demand expression. But speed is not the same as clarity, and movement is not always progress. The central question of the week is, can you remain connected to what matters while the pace begins to change? We begin with the Sun in Cancer, forming a trine to the North Node in Pisces. The Sun represents identity, vitality, purpose, visibility, and the conscious direction of the self. Cancer brings the Sun into the territory of emotional security, family, memory, home, care, protection, and belonging. The North Node in Pisces points towards a collective movement into trust, compassion, surrender, imagination, and greater tolerance for mystery. When the Sun trines the North Node, there can be a sense of alignment, not certainty, alignment. Something about who you are becoming may feel more emotionally honest. A decision may feel less like a strategic move and more like a return to something already known. Cancer and Pisces are both water signs. They understand that direction is not always established through logic. Sometimes we know the path because the nervous system often softens in its presence. Sometimes we recognize what belongs to us because we no longer need to defend ourselves against it. This transit can support movement towards greater emotional integrity. It may become clearer which relationships, environments, practices, or commitments actually nourish the life you are trying to build. The North Node does not always point towards what is comfortable, but under this trine, growth may feel less adversarial. There may be support, a conversation that confirms something, a moment of emotional recognition, a feeling that you are being asked to trust a quieter form of guidance. The question is not what looks impressive. It is what allows me to remain emotionally present within my own life. Cancer reminds us that purpose without belonging becomes exile. Pisces reminds us that direction without soul becomes machinery. Together, they ask us to move towards a future that does not require the abandonment of tenderness. On June 25th, Venus in Leo forms a trine to Saturn in Aries. Venus governs love, attraction, pleasure, money, beauty, relationship, and value. In Leo, Venus wants warmth. It wants loyalty. It wants affection to be expressed rather than implied. Venus in Leo is generous, creative, visible, and proud of what it loves. Saturn in Aries is teaching discipline around identity, action, self-command, and personal responsibility. When Venus and Saturn meet through a trine, affection and commitment can support each other. This is not the most dramatic form of love. It is one of the most dependable forms. Venus may provide the desire. Saturn provides the structure capable of carrying it. This could be a meaningful day for defining a relationship, making a creative commitment, establishing financial boundaries, or becoming more serious about something that brings joy. Leo wants the heart to speak. Saturn asks whether the heart can remain present after the moment of declaration. Because love is not only what we feel, it is what we are willing to maintain. Creativity is not only inspiration, it is the structure we build so inspiration has somewhere to return. Self-worth is not only confidence, it is the decision to stop participating in situations that repeatedly diminish us. This trine can help us translate desire into practice. A creative project may become more focused, a relationship more steady, A financial goal may feel more achievable because we are willing to work with limits rather than pretending they do not exist. There is dignity here, the dignity of showing up, the dignity of taking pleasure seriously enough to protect it, and of allowing love to mature beyond intensity. Saturn does not need to suppress Venus. It can give Venus endurance. On the same day, the Sun in Cancer squares Neptune in Aries. This complicates the atmosphere. The Sun wants conscious direction. Neptune dissolves certainty. Cancer seeks emotional safety. Aries seeks direct action and individual agency. Under this square, it may be difficult to distinguish instinct from fear, compassion from self-erasure, or vision from projection. The Sun in Cancer may want to protect what feels vulnerable. Neptune in Aries may idealize a new beginning or create confusion around who we are becoming. This can produce emotional fog. You may feel deeply affected without understanding why. A situation may feel urgent but remain difficult to define. You may want to retreat, rescue, or defend an act before you have enough information. This is not the best energy for forcing certainty. Neptune rarely becomes clearer under pressure. The harder we demand a definite answer, the more distorted perception may become. The work is to remain receptive without becoming ungrounded. Compassion does not require abandoning discernment. Sensitivity does not mean every feeling is prophetic. A powerful emotional response is as real as an experience. But it is not always a complete description of reality. This is where the Venus-Saturn trine becomes useful. Let structure support what Venus makes uncertain. Return to what has already proven reliable. Return to the commitment, the boundary, the routine, the facts. When the emotional field becomes difficult to interpret, do not make the most dramatic story your first conclusion. Wait. Let the mist move. Truth does not always reveal itself immediately. On June 28th, Mars in Taurus forms a sextile to Jupiter in Cancer. Before Mars leaves Taurus, it receives support. Mars represents action, desire, anger, courage, effort, and the instinct to pursue. In Taurus, Mars moves slowly. It conserves energy. It acts through persistence rather than speed. Jupiter in Cancer expands care, emotional security, home, family protection, and the desire to create a stronger foundation. Together, they support constructive effort. This is action in service of stability. It may be easier to take a practical step towards something that provides greater safety, a financial decision, a change within the home, a commitment to the body, a choice that supports family or emotional well-being. A project may move forward because it finally received enough time, patience, or material support. Mars in Taurus does not need constant momentum. It needs a worthwhile reason to continue. Jupiter in Cancer supplies the reason through care. What we protect becomes the source of effort. What we love becomes worth maintaining. And it asks, what action would make your life more inhabitable? Not more impressive, inhabitable. What would give your body greater steadiness? What would strengthen the home, the resource base, or the emotional foundation beneath everything else? This is grounded growth, the opportunity to act without forcing, to expand without destabilizing, to strengthen what has already taken root. Later on June 28th, Mars leaves Taurus and enters Gemini. The atmosphere changes immediately. Mars in Taurus moves through the body. Mars in Gemini moves through the mind. Action becomes quicker. Speech becomes sharper. Curiosity becomes more urgent. People may feel compelled to respond, debate, explain, research, travel, write, message, teach, argue, or pursue several interests at once. Mars entering Gemini creates mental heat. It can bring courage to conversations that have been avoided. It can help us move through information quickly. It favors writing, speaking, sales, studies, short journeys, projects requiring adaptability. But Mars is not naturally peaceful. Wherever Mars goes, it agitates. In Gemini, it agitates the mind and the communication field. Words may be used as weapons. Conversations become competitions. The desire to respond quickly can override the need to understand accurately. We may become attached to winning the argument rather than discovering what is true. This transit can also scatter energy. Mars wants action. Gemini sees multiple paths. The result can be the great deal of motion without sustained direction. Many conversations, many beginnings, many tabs open. Many plans activated simultaneously. But not everything can receive equal force. The central discipline of Mars in Gemini is choice. Which conversation deserves your energy? Which question deserves investigation? Which conflict is meaningful? Which one is simply stimulating? Mars in Gemini can make agitation feel productive, but nervous activity is not the same as purposeful action. This transit asks us to become more responsible with language, because words create movement. A sentence can begin a relationship, end one, start a conflict, clarify an agreement, expose a hidden truth, or send everyone chasing a story that was never accurate. Mars in Gemini reminds us that speech is action. Use it accordingly. To work with this transit personally, locate Gemini in your natal chart. The house Gemini occupies shows the life area, receiving Mars's heat, effort, and so on. Listen for your rising sign first, although your sun sign may also offer a secondary layer. Aries rising, Mars is in your third house. Mars activates communication, learning, siblings, neighbors, transportation, writing, and daily movement. Your mind may become unusually active. You may feel driven to write, speak, teach, study, or confront an unresolved conversation. There can be more movement within your immediate environment, including short trips, scheduled changes, or transportation issues. Be careful with sharp language. You may be correct and still communicate in a way that makes understanding possible. The work is to speak directly without turning every difference into a contest. Use the transit to write, learn, and ask better questions and say what has remained unspoken. Taurus rising, the second house. Mars activates money, income, possessions, self-worth, and values. You may become more motivated to earn, negotiate, sell, budget, or create several income streams, but spending can also accelerate. Gemini may create multiple financial priorities at once, making it difficult to decide where resources go. Conflict may arise when your values are challenged or when you feel your contributions are being underestimated. The work is to direct financial energy rather than react impulsively. Let this transit help you advocate for your value, diversify your skills, and become more conscious of where money follows attention. Gemini rising, your first house. Mars enters your house of identity, body, appearance, vitality, and self-direction. Energy rises. You may feel more assertive, impatient, restless, direct, or willing to pursue what you want. This can be energizing, especially after a period of hesitation. But Mars can also increase irritability and nervous tension. You may feel compelled to reinvent yourself quickly or begin several personal projects simultaneously. The work is to use the energy without letting it fragment you. Move the body, choose a direction, speak for yourself, but remember that constant reaction is not sovereignty. Cancer rising, Mars in the 12th. Mars activates the unconscious solitude, endings, hidden conflicts, spiritual work, rest, and self-undoing. Energy may become less visible externally, but more active internally. Old anger, unresolved conversations, dreams, or buried frustrations may surface. You may need more solitude than usual, even while the mind remains busy. This can be useful for research, therapy, journaling, spiritual inquiry, or completing work behind the scenes. but unexpressed anger may become anxiety, insomnia, or internal conflict. The work is to acknowledge what is moving beneath the surface. Not every battle must become public, but every hidden battle deserves conscious attention. Leo rising, Mars in the 11th. Mars activates friendship, community, collaboration, social networks, audience, activism, and long-term goals. You may become more active within groups or more driven to build a community around an idea. New alliances can form quickly. So can disagreements. Gemini introduces multiple social circles, conversations, and collective priorities. Be conscious of conflict within groups and of the temptation to spread energy across too many collaborations. The work is to know which future deserves your participation. Use your voice where it can create movement, but do not confuse social noise with genuine community. Virgo rising, Mars in the 10th. Mars enters the house of career, leadership, reputation, public life, and long-term achievement. Professional momentum increases. You may feel more ambitious, visual, and willing to advocate for an idea or pursue a new role. Communication becomes central to advancement. Writing, teaching, presenting, interviewing, managing information may become more important. Conflict with authority can also arise, especially if expectations are unclear. The work is to direct your ambitions strategically. You do not need to pursue every opportunity. Choose the professional conversations capable of creating meaningful movement. Libra rising, Mars in the 9th. Mars activates belief, publishing, teaching, higher education, travel, philosophy, spirituality, law, and the search for meaning. You may feel driven to study, teach, travel, publish, or defend a worldview. This can be intellectually invigorating, but it can also intensify arguments over beliefs. Gemini asks questions. Mars wants answers quickly. Be careful not to treat disagreement as an attack. The work is to pursue knowledge without becoming combative. Let curiosity challenge certainty. A belief strong enough to guide your life should also be strong enough to withstand examination. Scorpio rising, Mars in the 8th. Mars activates shared resources, debt, taxes, inheritance, intimacy, psychological depth, grief, and power. Conversations about money, trust, sex, dependency, or vulnerability may become unavoidable. You may feel compelled to investigate what has been hidden or to renegotiate an unequal exchange. Gemini can create multiple layers of information around shared financial or emotional situation. Do not act on partial knowledge. The work is to ask direct questions while remaining conscious of motive. Use the transit to clarify agreements, address debts, and speak honestly about what intimacy requires. Sagittarius rising, Mars in the 7th. Mars activates relationships, contracts, clients, collaborators, and open conflict. Other people may become more assertive. You may become less willing to avoid confrontation. Partnerships become active through conversation. This can bring attraction, debate, negotiation, or tension. Gemini seeks exchange, but Mars may turn exchange into competition. The work is to recognize that conflict can reveal information, but not every disagreement requires escalation. Choose partners capable of speaking directly without making communication a weapon. Capricorn rising, Mars in the 6th. Mars activates work, health, routines, service, co-workers, maintenance, and daily responsibility. The schedule may become busier. There may be several tasks, messages, errands, and projects competing for attention. This is useful energy for clearing backlogs, organizing systems, learning new skills, and becoming more efficient. But nervous strain and overcommitment are possible. The work is to distinguish urgency from importance. Your body may need movement, variation, and mental stimulation. It will also need rest from constant input. Productivity is useful only when the system producing it remains functional. Aquarius rising, Mars in the 5th. Mars activates creativity, romance, pleasure, performance, children, play, and self-expression. Creative energy rises. You may feel driven to write, speak, flirt, perform, teach, experiment, or begin several artistic projects. Romantic interactions can become lively, mentally stimulating, and occasionally argumentative. You may be attracted to intelligence, wit, and unpredictability. The work is to let creativity move without scattering it across too many beginnings. Choose one idea long enough to discover what it can become. Play is not wasted energy, but play becomes more powerful when given enough attention to develop. Pisces rising, Mars in the 4th. Here, Mars will activate home, family, ancestry, private life, emotional foundations, and living arguments. The home may become busier. There may be repairs, visitors, family conversations, relocation questions, or unresolved domestic tensions requiring action. Old family arguments may reappear through language. You may feel more mentally restless within the home or more determined to change the environment. The work is to communicate directly without turning the household into a battlefield. Use the energy to make the home more functional. Address what has been avoided. But remember that safety cannot be created through constant confrontation. This week begins with emotional alignment. The Sun trine the North Node helps us recognize what kind of future can support the heart. Venus trine Saturn asks us to make love, creativity, pleasure, and value more sustainable. The Sun square Neptune reminds us that emotional sensitivity does not remove the need for discernment. Mars sextile Jupiter supports practical action in service of security. And then Mars enters Gemini, changing the pace entirely. The week moves from water and earth into air, from feeling and building to thinking, speaking, and moving. The transition is significant. The beginning of the week asks, what nourishes me? The end of the week asks, what am I going to do with what I know? This week teaches us that alignment must eventually become action, but action changes form. At first, it may be steady, material, quiet. Then the current quickens, the mind fills with possibilities, the conversation begins. Mars and Gemini will ask us to move with greater flexibility, to speak more directly, to pursue knowledge, to question what has become mentally rigid. But it will also test our capacity to choose the more meaningful conversation over the distracting one, the precise word over the sharp one, the question that opens understanding over the argument that only produces heat. Let the heart establish the direction, let commitment give it structure. And when the mind begins to move quickly, remember, speed can carry you forward, but only intention can tell you where you're going. This work grows through word of mouth. If it's been meaningful to you, you can like, share, or subscribe. That's how it reaches the ones who need it.